sure that board's gonna project.
Yeah, this one right here. And then we'll take it over there. Okay, so it's got a pretty good range.
So I could kind of wander around right here.
Yeah. And so they go
Yeah, you're right over here. You're looking for your name.
We got the gold plate.
Vern, so the legs on that table are not set correctly. That could, It's not locked in.
Yeah, that fits. This is good.
We don't want you to.
I don't hear plan on doing any dancing or anything. I want to make sure the table.
Oh, Jesus.
I can take a couple days there, you know. I've been working pretty hard. Yeah. Good for you. Yeah.
Jump back. Oh, is it on that? Oh, okay. I was just looking. Yes.
And this still fit from last year, so. You get out. Okay, Grandpa. I see why you wrote me.
Hi, how are you?
That's a good.
Right over here, Sally. All right, time is 5:30. Thanks everybody for being here. I'll call the special joint city council and planning commission meeting to order. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll do roll call for the city council.
Gibson? Yes. Ellen.
Yep.
Deanna.
Yes.
Gerger. Yes. Jensen.
Here.
Sukram. Here. Lightban. Here. Vaughn.
Here.
City Council member present. Okay.
Now, a roll call for the planning commission.
Warsaw. Baker. Here. Lathrop. Wilson.
Here.
Sawyer. Carlson. Washburn.
Here.
Authorize.
Here.
Lamb.
Here.
You have 5 members present. You have a quorum.
Our item on the agenda tonight is to receive and discuss a report regarding the long-range transportation plan. We have Jason here with HDR. He will be doing our presentation. So Jason, go
Great.
ahead.
All right.
Yours.
Okay, thank you for all being here. Appreciate your time. I'm looking forward to talking about the materials you've got in front of you by the time we get to the end here. Am I coming through on the mic okay? Okay. Is that better? I have a little bit of happy feet, so I'll just try to keep within range. So wanted to really quick walk through a little bit how we got here. I don't want to get into too much depth about that because I know we've spoken a little bit about that in the past, but kind of refresh everybody about the process for how we got to this part. And then talk about that draft transportation plan framework, some of the projects you've got there in front of you, and what some of the thoughts are with some of those projects. So really quick, again, I know when Nick's presented on the comprehensive plan, you've seen this slide, but essentially, you know, this is one of the 3 different plans going on together in unison. The comprehensive plan, the Unified Development Code, and the long-range transportation plan. Sometimes you might hear me say LRTP, that's shorthand for the transportation plan. But, you know, we've got this kind of 6-step process. And right now we're talking about those framework plans and getting your feedback on, you know, what's in that framework of that plan. So had through discussions with the public in our public meetings, through working with you, working with city staff, identified a vision for the transportation plan. And you can see we've underlined some of the words there, but essentially a safe system that's accessible and reliable. It's connected, you know, we're talking about all users of the network, you know, opportunities for safety and good connections for pedestrians, obviously vehicular travel, you know, taking care of freight movement while, you know, kind of trying to reconcile some of those conflicts we get between, you know, the important job freight does while also understanding it can have impacts on neighborhoods and downtown. And basically promoting enhancements for resiliency, economic growth, and community character, while at the same time making sure, you know, we've made a lot of great investments in the past, make sure we continue to reinvest in our system. So we had 6 kind of major goal areas that really framed the development of the plan. You know, safety, a lot of those words we just talked about are on here. And so those are kind of the overarching framework for how we went through, started identifying what are some of the gaps maybe we have in our system today and into the future, and how do we kind of form and evaluate potential improvements. So really quick, for kind of understanding where the system is today, going through and doing a pretty comprehensive look at, you know, where we are with traffic operations and safety, looking for congestion, crash issues, things like that. Looking at bicycle and pedestrian connections where we might have some disconnections there. Freight, obviously, is something that's important to the community. And, you know, other system options as we kind of walk through here. Really quick, traffic engineers grade congestion on a scale from A to F. Level of service A is being the best. Level of service F is kind of gridlock congestion. If you sit there at a signal for a couple of, you know, it turns red a couple times and you don't get through, that's level of service F. You probably had it a time or two. We're kind of trying to look at average conditions. And if you can see the maps, you can see we've got greens and yellows, which are kind of in the middle of the pack. Not a whole lot of serious congestion going on in Fremont. A little bit on Broad Street, a little bit up on 23rd, but again, these are level of service C. A little bit of level of service C up here, out of Luther Military. But volume, we have about between 14 and 20,000 vehicles a day up on 23rd. And those are some of the highest volumes in the city. So overall, today, we don't have a ton of congestion. It probably doesn't surprise any of you that much. Sorry, I'll get back next to the microphone. And part of this also is looking at traffic safety, looking at crashes. We had 5 years of crash data. We looked before the pandemic because crash patterns and travel patterns kind of got thrown off a little bit there in 2020. So we looked at the 5 years of data to kind of average out kind of the peaks and valleys of all these events. Identified some of the highest frequency crash intersections. Again, we see 23rd, a little bit on Broad, and some on Military there. Also looked at bicycle and pedestrian crashes. These thankfully don't happen quite as often. And over that time period had about 63 crashes over those 5 years. And then also looked at the bicycle and pedestrian system where connections are, looking for opportunities to kind of complete those connections. As you can see, you know, the trail system really is on the periphery of the community. So looking for opportunities to really connect across the community. We heard a lot of input on that in our public meetings and talking with you all. Freight clearly is really important for jobs and the economy here locally, and for just moving goods out to, you know, throughout this community and across Nebraska and the wider region. And so looking at the data that are available, looking for where a lot of the freight generation is coming from, where are a lot of the freight that's getting created, where is it coming from? And you can see a lot of it's right there kind of on the south and east side of downtown. And I don't think that's probably a surprise with all the types of employers and development we've got down there. And so also, you know, kind of looking at where we've got those crossings, where we've got rail crossings with the railroads, the BNSF and the UP. And, you know, looking at where some of those conflicts are. And so I kind of moved through that pretty fast because I want to get to some of the projects and we can start talking about that. But so that kind of identified the groundwork for, you know, where the system is today and what some of those issues are today. And so also part of the study was looking at the future. And so obviously with the land use plan and the comprehensive plan, we're looking at how we're going to grow as a community. And so the transportation plan really looked at what a reasonable, but kind of maybe a slightly aggressive scenario might be for growth by the year 2045. You might notice the population totals there are slightly higher than the city. As part of the transportation plan, we needed to go a little bit outside the city boundaries. So we've got a little area around the city, but you can see we're anticipating that, you know, that growth driven by the city of Fremont would be about 21% growth in population and households by 2045. And that the growth of jobs would be even higher, about 33%. And so, you know, this is based on looking at, you know, economic projections and enhancing it a little bit. Because what we want to do is make sure we don't underestimate the growth. We're going to go for maybe a slightly higher than historical growth. And so this way we kind of built in some need to address, you know, growth pressures in part of our plan. And so then, you know, when you look at the comprehensive plan and the land use plan that was part of that, it's really planning for beyond 2045. And so what we needed to do is kind of talk through and figure out what some of those kind of most likely growth areas would be between today and 2045. And you can see this is where we're anticipating new housing. And so the lighter greens are about 100 new households in those larger areas. The yellows are up to 250, and then the oranges are up to 500, and the reds are over 500. So you can see we've got a lot of growth on the fringes. We've got some infill growth, and we've got, you know, significant housing growth in the northeast and on the southeast. And then job growth, again, we've got more, you know, continued growth in kind of the industrial areas through here, continued growth out on the kind of in the southeast quadrant. You can see the new bypass right there. And then continued just mixes of commercial and office and retail and industrial growth, again, in some of those fringe growth areas as well. So at one point we talked about the travel demand model, and it's essentially it's where we look at land use growth and look at our transportation system, and we use it to kind of forecast where we anticipate traffic growth to happen. And so this is a map of that traffic growth, and you can see what we're doing is the fatter the lines and the greener the lines, that's the more traffic we're anticipating. So we're anticipating some growth out on 23rd Street. Obviously the Southeast bypass is all new growth because it doesn't exist today. And so we've got, you know, portions of that are up to 10,000 vehicles a day. And so when that Southeast bypass gets built, you see a little bit of some declines on some of these existing streets. It's pulling some traffic off there. And so we've got volumes up into 24,000 up on 23rd Street. So we're starting to get higher volumes, and we start to see a few issues out there. One of the projects you'll see on there is looking at, we call it signal management in there, but it's really going through and upgrading technology and retiming the signals every few years. That those types of volumes are pretty manageable on a 4-lane divided cross section like you've got out there. So it's just making sure that you're managing it as well as you can. And that was the highest volumes that we were seeing. And we'll talk a little bit about those projects here in a minute. Before I go any further, is this making sense? Have I gone too fast? I kind of wanted to get to the punchline and talk about the projects, and figured you all did too. So don't pay a ton of attention to this. This is the one I want you to kind of look at is this table right here. So what we looked at is, we've got this growth in households and jobs we already talked about up 20% and 33%. These are kind of measures of just the cumulative network, how everything's performing. And the key takeaways here is that you can see trips get a little longer. The average trip in Fremont goes from about 3.4 miles long to about 3.6 miles long. But the good news is we don't see a ton more congestion. In fact, speeds go a little bit up with the Southeast bypass getting built. So the biggest takeaways are that, as the community grows by over 20%, congestion remains minimal overall. And so the good news is we're not talking in that project list about the needs for a bunch of 5-lane road widenings and things like that. Yes, sir.
Could you explain what the acronyms VMT?
Yes, I will. So vehicle miles traveled is essentially you count every trip and how far it drives. And so it's just an accumulation of how much travel occurs in an area on a given day. VHT is vehicle hours traveled. And so that's how much time people spend in vehicles traveling every day. And so what's interesting here is you see VMT goes up more than VHT. And so that means that's how you get, that's how you get a higher average speed. Exactly. Yep. Miles per hour right there. Yeah, that's, I can bury you all in acronyms and bore you to death, I'm sure. But yeah, so those are the key takeaways there. And really quick, and I don't want to get into a ton of analysis on the funding allocations and all that, but I think one of the key takeaways is that through talking with Dave Kadakin and looking at historical spending and what future needs are, we're anticipating about 100, if you took that whole pie of 100% of what we spend on transportation as a community, about 85% of that would be on reinvesting in our current corridor. So whether it's resurfacing streets or going through and reconstructing, every 20, 30, 40 years, that's the majority of how we will continue spending. Again, one of our goals is to take, that transportation system we've got and keep using it to its highest and best. And that's kind of the plan ahead. So when you see a lot of these projects are what we call new corridor investments. These might be things like, well, we talk about 23rd Street. We would call like new signals are probably new corridor investments. If you resurface 23rd Street, we'd call that back in this pot of reinvesting. But that's also including widening, where we identified some 3-lane widening projects, adding turn lanes here and there, things like that. We would call those kind of new corridor investments. So here's where we get to the project list. And so again, project sources, some of this stuff came out of just things we identified through the technical analysis, but some of them came from previous plans and we looked at some of them didn't kind of fit with trends that we saw happening. A lot of it came from, ideas that staff and you all and the public provided along the way. And we kind of vetted with, what we were seeing from a technical perspective. And so you can see we've got these organized, and I know you guys have had a chance to start looking at it, and I'm gonna see if this travels with me a little bit here. So we've got some different project types here, and I want to talk through what these mean. We've got what we call calming. So some of these were projects where we'd heard opportunities for potentially making them both more pedestrian friendly and for potentially slowing traffic down a little bit. And so we've got those identified on Broad Street there, kind of just on the edge of the downtown area and maybe slightly to the north of Military. And then also on First Street down on the south end down here.
Can you answer questions?
Yes, sir.
Calming item?
Yep.
So it looks like here on Broad Street, that's near our city auditorium.
Yep.
South of the library, is that
Right.
what I understand?
Yep, correct.
So what will you do different in there than what we're doing right now in that
Yeah.
area? Because the speed limit in that area is 25,
Right. And so it's a little bit wider pavement through there.
which just got done about 5 years
Right.
ago.
So what we would probably do is that section, I think we would focus mostly on pedestrian safety. And so at the intersections, make sure we've got good pedestrian crosswalks marked, and then look for the opportunity if there's a mid-block crossing up here where people
We
are.
added the new one right by the auditorium.
Yeah, and so just make sure those are highly visible and marked. You will see we do have the potential in the long term that what we have a recommendation on the back end here as the bypass is built
Yeah.
to monitor traffic on Broad Street and see in the long term if there's the potential maybe to go to potentially 3 lanes through there, 1 lane in each direction and center turn lane.
Which we have years ago in that northern sector in there between 23rd South and Least, probably down about what, 10th, I think.
Yeah, I think all of that's 3 lanes. Yep.
It's been that way for years.
Yep.
More or less the whole going with Beltway around the south.
Right.
with the truck down
Right.
there.
Exactly. So yeah, we're kind of going to recommend that's a project we didn't include here, but potentially could be something, again, kind of through this downtown area in the long term,
Okay.
something to evaluate as, again, traffic patterns kind of establish themselves. Yes, sir.
Traffic management on 23rd Street, is that gonna be like Dodge where you go by Applebee's on a green light and go all the way through Fremont with green lights and you stay at 35?
That when you retime signals, that's always the idea. Yeah. You can't ever do it perfectly because you've got to favor one direction over the other. But no, you're right. If you hit Dodge and there's not too much traffic, that's my way into work every day. And as long as it's not too busy, it's pretty good. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Before we get too
Yeah,
far
yeah.
into The calming aspect.
Yeah.
I noticed that we don't have calming in effect on Ridge Road where we have an existing trail system and some
Mhm.
truck traffic, but I think that's been restricted since it was damaged
Okay.
in flood.
Okay.
Seemed to me that would be a good opportunity for more
Okay.
calming there. You see it's kind of a very straight line. So you
Yeah.
get your speed up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a nice new trail through there, as I recall.
Right.
Yep. Jeremy's making notes. Oh, Jeremy Williams is with me, by the way, everyone.
Controlled by the county down there, I think on the ridge.
It possibly could be. I'm not sure where.
Yeah, and
That's the county.
we can suggest some things that might be some collaboration with the county. I think go ahead.
I have a question with regards to this goal.
Yep.
So as we're looking at this, do you have underlying information that goes along with this that explains in level of detail why you're proposing to do some of these things in particular that we're not going to necessarily see tonight, but that you
Yeah, so we kind of, for each of these projects, we have basically a project like why it's on there. Yeah,
So in particular, I guess as far as my questions
Yep.
right now is, so you have calming on First Street,
right,
which I know residents in
right.
Ward 3 and 4 will much appreciate. Is that kind of calming devices are you anticipating
So,
in those areas?
yeah.
And the last question that would
Yep.
go along with that is, you have widening on Morningside from Luther
Yep.
to the bypass or almost to.
Yep.
And I'm interested in why you think that might be, if it's integrated with Port Authority, because folks in Ward 4 are interested in lessening traffic, not increasing traffic.
Yep. Okay. So the first question on First, I think what we talked about, there are rather large gaps between, there's kind of a large area where cars don't have to stop through there. And so we'd be looking at some mid-block crossings potentially. I know and I'm trying to remember back, it's rather wide. And so there's opportunities maybe in some places to do what we call a pedestrian, you do it either at an intersection and just basically narrow the cross section right there in one spot where pedestrians can cross. And so it tends to have that visual of cueing traffic to slow down. Also makes it safer for pedestrians because instead of crossing 40 feet of pavement, they only have to cross 24 feet.
We have 2 schools in that area.
Right. Right. So in some places, it might just be as simple as, bright pavement markings and better sign placement. In other places, it might be actually physically moving those curbs closer to each other. Again, it'll cost you an on-street parking spot or two, but it's those pedestrian safety type applications. And so I don't think we're really talking speed bumps and chicanes. I think we think the pedestrian treatments are the traffic calming.
And the Morningside widening.
Yeah, so that one, if I recall, is a 3-lane widening, correct? And we're starting to see volumes kind of creep up in the future. We have a lot of just general, if you remember back to those maps, and I can go back, we've got quite a bit of just housing and employment growth down in that southeast quadrant, not necessarily related to the inland port. Yes, Jennifer.
Do you want to explain how you do your traffic zone analysis, just a real high level?
Yeah. Yep. So again, I can go down the rabbit hole too far on these things, but so we basically, as part of the funding for the transportation plan, the state required Fremont to do what we call a travel model. And so basically what it is, it's a computer model that simulates the interaction of the street system and the land use. And so we know, for instance, which land use types create how many trips and how far those trips usually go. And so that basically we turn some knobs until we get it to do a good job to replicate what's happening today. And then you saw those colored maps where we added houses and all those things. And those related again back to the comprehensive plan and the land use plan. And so what we did was just see where that growth, again, with that land use, how much growth happened and where did it want to go. And so that's kind of the idea there. And so again, on a project like this, if that growth never happens, it might not ever get warranted. These projects on this list are, most of them would be mid and long-term type projects is what we're thinking. Because we think there's several projects that are currently in the capital plan that we're not showing. Go ahead.
One more thing, could you describe how a 3-lane road?
Yeah, my bad. Thank you. Right. So you'll see also, and this segues a little bit into a couple of other, we generically called them road diets, but it's basically converting a 4-lane to a 3-lane. And so what that entails is a 4-lane road is 2 through lanes in each direction. There's no center turn lane. So somebody turning left on a 4-lane road is essentially turning left in kind of a shared through left turn lane, right? And so with the,
So just about probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago, this street right out here in Military was 3 lanes. And got widened out at that time, now they're 4 lane because of the traffic pattern, or the traffic flow through there at certain times of the day.
Yep.
And now today, I don't know if there's anything that's changed between the hours, like say at 8 to 9, and then in the afternoon from 4 to 5.
Right.
And from period of that years ago to where we are today, because I see times during the mid time of the day, there's hardly anybody out here.
Right.
And I don't know if that's going to make a difference at those times of the day to try to get from that side of Fremont to that side of town.
Yeah, and so I guess with any of these recommendations where we're talking about changing from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, we would recommend a detailed corridor study before we get there. So somebody goes in with, we're doing this from 30,000 feet, but based on the planning rules of thumb we have, they're pretty good candidates for road diets, but you'd want to get more into it. So do you want me to talk about 3 lanes or? Yeah. Yep. So we talked about the 4 lane. So with the 3 lane, you've got 1 through lane in each direction, but that center turn lane, and you guys have seen, you've probably all seen a 3 lane, that center turn lane is basically just dedicated to people turning left. And so the trade-off here is you've got corridors kind of like Military where you've got streets every block, you've got driveways here and there as well. There's a lot of left turns happening in those corridors, right? And so a lot of times you'll have turns happening from that center lane if somebody's distracted or not paying attention, or there's, changing lanes going on, you can have some higher crashes on those. And so the majority of times you'll find a 3-lane section is safer than a 4-lane section. And so from a capacity standpoint, the way of carrying traffic, in some cases, the capacity is the same, because if that inner left lane is getting used for a lot of turns, it's kind of a wash. So that's why, I'm using rules of thumb here, but with the daily traffic volumes we see in the military corridor, it would be a candidate for considering changing to a 3-lane section. And so with that improved safety, the potential for, on-street parking or pedestrian enhancements or, things like that. So.
What about further east on Military as it leads towards some of our schools? Yeah, and that remains just a 2-lane, I believe, shortly after your road diet ends.
Grant East does,
Is it just 2 lanes?
yeah. from Grant
It's not
East
3
there,
lanes?
it's
Okay.
2 lane.
We didn't identify capacity issues through there. Doesn't mean nothing registered on our safety analysis, but we'll jot that one down. Jeremy, do you mind looking at military out further to the west?
I wonder if that wouldn't be money better spent to get the 3-lane at least on it.
To get some turn lanes through there, yeah, or at least find an intersection or two where, yep.
Also, is there any particular reason why you're widening that Luther north of 23rd Street doesn't run all the way to 23rd and why it doesn't run out to the 275 bypass? If they're planning.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Wouldn't you want the traffic to actually exit down and then come back?
Right. So I believe this section's already improved through there. I think it's already is it 3 lanes? Yeah, I think it's already 3 lanes. North of there, yeah. So we kind of ended it where we weren't seeing any additional growth. That's a 2-lane rural blacktop today, right? From a traffic demand, if you're going to build an interchange, you might want to put 3 lanes all the way out there. We can go ahead and add that. This is likely, we're putting it in the category of like a vision type project. There isn't a huge need for it today, but it's something in the long term might make sense, especially as that part of town grows. And so that would obviously need to be something that would need to be kind of negotiated with the Department of Transportation, but yeah. So in that whole growth area there, you see we've got new roads and we've got that widening on Luther. That whole area would, basically fill in as development occurs, is where you'd want to extend those roads. And so we're kind of trying to come up with a road network up there that makes sense.
Hey, does the state allow these to be both built? Because we get the bypass built out here, and I can't remember the 2 acronyms, one was Beltway and one freeway. There was a lot of discussion on where we were gonna put turn lanes off of that road to get to Fremont. And the one on Highway 30 was not a floor relief up there. It was that great intersection. We had a lot of problems with accidents in that particular corridor.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's certain recommendations on spacing of interchanges. Usually 2 miles. You're usually pretty good with a 2-mile spacing like you've got there. But yeah, and there's a whole process you need to go through because you need to justify basically why you need an interchange. And then clearly those are, you saw the cost, those are pretty pricey ticket items. So yeah. And so, so we've got, again, road expansion to support some of the development. One thing that we're looking at, and I know this has been discussed in the past, well, and I guess there's 2 concepts together here. We've added these potential for truck routes. So basically taking Cloverly here and South Main Street here and kind of reinforcing them, adding, reconstructing for truck standards, basically. Yep. Okay.
And so do you feel that there's going to be a switch in traffic from the north using that Broad Street to turn on Cloverly, that you wanted to go up to Main Street there, or what's the drive there?
So a lot of the industrial growth, or a lot of the industrial jobs, are kind of right through this area right here. And so the hope is that with this bypass, there is the enticement, for lack of a better word, to get out and around that way. Well, and so one of the things that, we looked at was in tandem with evaluating how well these truck routes work is, can we go to 2-way street flows in downtown? I know there was a study done in 2009. Generally, from a traffic capacity standpoint, I don't think the 1-ways are probably probably required. I mean, there's stop signs at the intersections downtown now. So all the data would point to the fact that that would operate pretty well. It would make access to businesses a little easier. I know downtown business districts, tend to like those types of improvements. And so there would be the opportunity there. We would just want to make sure that we weren't, that we're giving trucks a valid, efficient way to access and circulate into the businesses. And so we just wouldn't want to have a situation where we'd encourage more trucks through downtown.
Let me ask you the downtown. I mean,
Yep.
would be changed, say the 3-lane traffic, saying going north, south, east, west. Would you change the parking to like say all diagonal, or is there a advantage to have parallel and diagonal, or what's some of the advantage there?
Yeah, it's just how much road width you've got. So you just have to reorient it. So I know you've got some where you've got.
Cars, you can go diagonally as opposed to
Sure.
parallel.
Yeah. Yep. If you've got the road width to do it. Yep. You do.
Two other observations that I see, we have it in the budget.
Yep.
That is one of the items, and that is,
Yep.
military, there's a project already
Yep.
designated in the budget for widening the width of the front.
Yep.
I don't see that.
That's, yeah. So those are the capital. Oh, sorry.
Completion of Johnson Drive widening, which we get half of, which also takes you to the middle school. Widening completion.
Right.
And you consider those and not to show them?
No, sorry. We do have a list of the projects that are already in the capital plan. So these are beyond the capital plan. Sorry if I didn't mention that. So those are assumed, and we're modeling those, and those are part of our baseline assumptions. Yeah.
Is there a map that incorporates all of those?
Yeah, we are working on that. Yeah. No, you're fine. That would cause some confusion if you're all expecting those to be in place. And we're not saying they're not there, but yeah, there are so yeah, that project and then Johnson, you can see we've got a potential future grade separation there. And then we also show an extension of Johnson potentially down to the bypass.
That would have it connected with bypass, or we just go there? There's going to be
I don't-
access?
I'm trying to remember where we've got access points. It might, honestly, it might be off the old highway or no, Yeah, I think Johnson is the access point. So we've got, because today, the way it's going to be laid out, I believe we've got Cloverly here is an access point, and that's why we were showing Cloverly improved. And then we've got the old highway going underneath or over, I don't remember which. And then this little spur here come back on, and then Johnson then could be extended up. Yep. And then there's the interchange. Going through that project list, and I talked about this, but yeah, you're talking about getting all the signals in progression to kind of time to the speed limit and all that for efficiency through 23rd was kind of the idea there.
Going back to the
Yeah.
business downtown.
Yes. Oh, okay. Okay. So that was the idea with the one way, is it? Okay. Yeah.
Will your underlying detail that we're not sharing tonight, I understand that.
Yeah.
Also incorporate your anticipated business. What are local streets, arterial streets, et cetera.
Turning, yeah, for showing the functional classes for these new streets. Yeah.
And those
Yep.
federal requirements as to distribute.
Right. Yep. We will summarize that. I know FHWA has got some guidance on how you should hit all those categories, and we will show all that. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I have a question. How about the- We got a buyout plan over-
Right. And actually, do we have, hold on. So where's that project we had on? We had a, through this neighborhood, we had a project on Jones. So I think it was at Jones Street. Yeah. I'm not quite sure why it's not on here. I apologize. We do have a project that would take Jones and kind of be a through project here. Understanding there's been some hurdles, with that project. So what we do is this is a gravel road today. Yeah. And then it kind of comes into this neighborhood. So we'd look at paving all that and giving folks kind of a back way out of that neighborhood when there's trains on the tracks.
What I'm saying is access from Drive 1 to 77. You'll have, I mean, I can just take my daughter to be back.
Right.
We have cars backed up all the day.
Yeah. No, and so the thought here was that this route through here is a patch. It's a low impact sort of improvement that could get you when the trains are blocking here, that you can get through here and back up that way. It's obviously not as direct, understood, but
We have a problem right up there with truck stop for one, and those trucks are in and out of that truck stop constantly with being 2-lane, and what Deb's talking about.
Mhm.
The citizens living in Washington Heights will use Judy Street to enter onto 77. And cars coming, trucks, whatever, southbound, try to cross that, they're gonna go back up to the bypass, swing around the east side of town.
Yep.
That's a challenge out there.
To make this
Yeah.
movement right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to execute a left-hand turn off duty going 77 north is also a bit precarious. You're staring up the viaduct there.
Actually, yeah, I did this one. It was a little bit of a challenge. Yeah.
So we did talk at council about whether or not Judy Drive went into the county for T going west
Mhm.
was a alternative to the viaduct that we did not approve. Because then you have a way of getting over to 77
Mhm.
without actually going around.
Okay.
All the way to the north and collecting the bypass. You can get on if you want to really stay in town.
Right.
You don't really want to go clear out to the bypass and come back. So that area right in there where you just travel
Yep.
with your, we did talk about that. That's county today.
Yep.
There's a bridge there.
Mhm.
But we did talk about if that was going to be a solution for Washington Heights.
Hey, Brad,
Okay.
do you know if that's gonna be our access out there to get to 23rd Street? If I was from North Bend, Fremont, without coming up to Broad? On that road there, Ridge? Because I think 20 gets close, I believe. If I understand that right.
Yes.
How do you determine on state highway where these signals?
How would you get someone to stop going down the road?
Yeah. So if you've been on like Highway 31, Highway 6, something like that. A lot of those advanced warning signs. Sorry. You see a lot of those advanced warning signs for rural signals like that. Yeah, it's clearly not ideal. You'd want to make sure there was enough sight distance and enough warning that it would be safe. Yeah, that would be something they'd have to look at in terms of state would do signal warrants and things like that. They'd have to analyze how much traffic's happening and all that, turning traffic and peak hour traffic and all that. But so it sounds like maybe we'd want to show something connecting. Again, another state standard would be the spacing of intersections on an expressway. And so we'd need to make sure we come up with something that would be significantly spaced out between here. Oh, and you're right. Good point. Thank you. I was just going to say right off of this new one right here. Yep. Right here. Right. So, yeah. And that. Yep. So, okay, what we could, yeah, we can look into where we could space a connection over there. So we will add that and we'll make sure we show this one that was in there too.
Was an idea thrown out there, which
Mhm.
People coming in from the north.
Yeah. So you're up in here.
Well, it's a speed limit, it's 55 going to Viaduct. It's 45 going to Viaduct, is what's going on up there.
Okay. So some sort of traffic calming when you kind of get over Highway 30 back into town there.
Speed limit.
Yeah, 77 north shouldn't be 55.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times what you need to do on those is introduce some sort of change to the road to basically visually reinforce people to slow down as well. If the road's wide open and it's designed for 65 miles an hour, you can put up 45-mile-an-hour signs, but it doesn't always work. So, okay. Okay. All right, I want to make sure we can talk about the bicycle and pedestrian stuff really quick too. I guess if there's other comments as you go through this, what we'll do is we'll add kind of the reasons for the projects like you were talking about, and making sure we add that. So bicycle and pedestrian opportunities that we've identified here, again, some of them from previous planning efforts, some of them are things that come up through the public process or talking with you. You can see we've kind of reintroduced these calming projects again on the pedestrian side where we might have some crossings. You've got the Fever Trail here, you can see on that rail right of way. We've got some other kind of side paths. These are basically at least 10-foot wide sidewalks, basically adjacent to streets. And so as you go through and probably as you go through and reconstruct streets, it's a good opportunity to go in and add those trails. So you remember when we showed you that map of the existing, we've got great trails over here, some trails over here. This is the opportunity to kind of connect all that up.
I have to have a map showing all the trails.
Yeah, not on me, sorry, no. But I can go back and show that to you. But yeah, what we probably in the plan, we would show the current and proposed trails. And I know we've talked about, there's a few improvements over here in the current capital plan that we're not showing on this as well. Yeah, no real concept. And that's not a great, it's one where you'd want to maybe look at a grade separation if you can for pedestrians. At those interstate speeds, you wouldn't want. There's,
Lines up to go underneath the.
I was going to say.
Interchange.
That one there's got taken out, that's that grade. Where he's got his pen there.
Right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to look for an opportunity like a mid-block crossing where you'd have pedestrian actuated signals on something like that. So somebody could push a button and they'd flash and you'd have bright stripes and signs, but we do have a few kind of shared road projects. So these would basically be slow streets where the folks that were, say, bicycling and wanted to get to trails out of neighborhoods could use these kind of lower volume, lower speed streets, but those are only in a few kind of isolated places there.
16 and 18 in the south part.
Yep.
Is there a reason that we want pedestrians walking around in an industrial area?
Yeah, those were opportunities to connect to existing trails. You'd have to build side paths with them, but yeah.
Having a heavy industrial area like that with the truck traffic and everything else.
And it's not,
That's one more thing.
yep.
The trucks and everything have to look out for that you got trained.
Right.
It seems better to keep them out of that area if at all possible.
Well, and it's probably not the most scenic route for, pedestrians too. So no, understood. Right. Yeah. So yeah, those would probably be lower priority trails. But again, if we get to some point where the system's matured and we've got, connections through town, we're looking for ways to connect here on the south side. Again, ways to get,
Gotta get diverted by the bypass anyway.
that would be the idea. Yeah. But there's still a lot of traffic getting generated right in there against those businesses. So
Any particular reason why on east side between Morningside and Military,
Mhm.
that stops, doesn't go all the way up and hook you
Yeah.
into Military. It's a paved trail aspect.
Are you talking about that extent?
Further east, like on Luther, I mean, that road, that trail is already existent most of the way. Why isn't it connected up by the middle school?
So were you talking about this connection right through here? So this is the existing
Yeah.
trails. Yeah.
Existing
So
trail,
the idea
and
is to
then
take
there's
it
a
into the
gap, then
existing.
it picks it up again at Military and goes out to the bypass.
Okay, we'll have to look back. We thought there was a connection right through there. We'll go back and make sure the trail goes all the way through. Yeah, no, the idea was to connect all the way through. So we'll go back and make sure we've got all those details.
Talk a little bit about the shared road aspect of 0275, please.
Yeah, I think that one would have been that's a shoulder. Yeah, on that particular one, that would be a shoulder application. So typically you just sign them and there's a shoulder, a paved shoulder, and yeah.
Probably facilitate the lowering of the speed limit. That's so far.
Well, yeah, and and again, it's probably not as critical of a connection as it used to be when the bypass is built. So it's definitely something you could evaluate for lowering the speeds. Yeah, I'm sure.
Drive it every day.
Yeah.
I was sort of under the impression that when we put Bluestem in out in that,
Mhm.
that somehow in the discussion there was traverse over to what would be the 23rd Street corridor, the shopping area. Store. Let's see that.
This one here.
It's part of that, but then Bluestem's in that square up there
Mhm.
to the west.
Oh,
And
sorry.
I
Yep.
thought it was supposed to go down towards that lighter grade. Corridor. And there's
Mhm.
nothing planned for sidewalk or trails or anything going west. It's less
So add some trails.
than- I thought
into,
that was discussed when they're subdividing.
okay, I'll get those details from Jennifer. Can you make a note about Blue Stem? Thank you.
Have a bike trail going all the way down 19th Street. I don't see any of that going down 19th with the Deer Parkway. Is that on hold or? is that-
I think that's one that's assumed in our 6-year plan. Yeah. Yep. Thank you. Again, yep. Yeah, that whole right through here, we're assuming is going to be done. Yeah.
I have a question too about that.
Yep.
Prior to any time, there was discussion of
Okay.
and whatever reason.
Okay. Okay. Yep. That was what I was wondering. Yeah. Right. Well, yeah, clearly as the city builds more trails, that'll have to be a consideration of maintenance and things like that. There's opportunities again with if the road widen or the road diet were implemented, there's a potential that you could move that curb line away from those trees and maybe put the trail, because you'd be basically the potential to gain another 12 feet of pavement that you could,
And
again,
the trail
move
would
it.
have more benefit closer to the existing trail that goes to the schools as
Right.
opposed to further.
Right.
Talking about military east of, west of.
Right through here.
That's where we would. Oh, yeah, all the way to the side. yeah.
Yep.
That's already wide to a degree.
And this,
But not as wide as, not as wide as you.
make sure we've got a trail over there. I think we, yep. Okay, so this has been helpful, very helpful. Are there other, and I moved on from the roadway. Did we have any other just questions on this?
What's the purpose of the new road number 20? East 275.
Yeah, this would be just kind of a circulator to support the potential inland port. Kind of the just access road type. Any other comments, questions on bicycle and pedestrian? So, and we do have kind of, I guess, a sneak peek. We're going to start looking at the timing of these and the funding and what we think is reasonably fundable. I think a lot of this is reasonably fundable with existing transportation sources. Some of them will need to go look for grants or some developer support, potentially things like that. But so what we'll do is add kind of that the purpose for the projects, what the, you know, what the goal of the project is, what, you know, why it's in there, some of the funding and potential timing applications with this, and then make sure we do the functional classification like you were mentioning. And those are the next steps. Yep. Nope, sorry, this is for roadway. So this would be that traffic signal improvements. Yep. Yeah, I jumped slides on you. Okay. Yeah, and I know you guys need to get on with your next appointment. Jennifer, is there anything else we want to cover? Okay. So I guess the other things we'll add is that, and we talked about this, but following the bypass opening, really monitor traffic on Broad Street. Really get an idea if there's opportunities to kind of narrow that cross section through there. With, you know, can we turn it to 3 lanes through the downtown area, make it more pedestrian friendly? And evaluate truck restrictions through downtown after the truck route projects open. So we talked about that South Street project and that Cloverly project. Look at how the truck flows are moving if we're serving all of that, all of the demand. And if so, can we look at restricting truck traffic through downtown for just deliveries?
You got one hurdle in it downtown, Burke, Mid.
Yeah, they're close, I know.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep, no, so that's the idea with those projects, was to give kind of as direct access back to Broad and over to Cloverly to the bypass as possible.
They don't see any older Alden and how the route the trucks in and out of there.
Yeah, no, there isn't an easy solution for a few of those businesses right on the edge of downtown.
Do you have an opinion as to the effectiveness of the electronic radar speed monitoring? They're not photo cameras, they're not taking tickets, they just register your speed and give you an indication you're running over the limit. Do you have an opinion as to the effectiveness of those as a common device?
Who gets the highest score?
I'm not sure I have. I would say from my anecdotal opinion, sometimes you see that and didn't realize how fast you're going, you might slow down. Yeah.
I see Inglewood's putting those in, and they were discussed as one of the opportunities for controlling speed on first.
Are they doing any before and after studies? Do you know?
I have no idea. And I don't
What-
think
we'll-
we did any studies like that. in the
Well,
Suburban district.
Jeremy, do you mind writing that one down too? The speed advisory signs. We'll do a little research and see how effective, if there's good case studies on that. Okay, nothing else. Thank you. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yep.
So when that bypass, the 75 goes in,
Yep.
Is there a way after, say, 10th Street, to say, not getting to kind of restrict?
Mhm.
Maybe restrict the amount of trucks going through the bypass?
Yeah, I mean, city can set truck routes. I mean, you obviously want to.
Appreciate it, I think. A lot of people do that with pictures falling off the walls.
Yep. I mean, clearly there's some trucks that will have to use it because there's businesses that have deliveries and things like that.
Sure.
But yeah, cities can on city streets can set truck policy. Yeah. Yep. No, good question. Thank you. Appreciate that. Was very helpful to give us some more direction. It's a good opportunity to talk.
Information, thank you.
Thank you.
Need to adjourn officially, right? We'll start with the planning commission.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Digger? Wilson?
Aye.
Washburn?
Aye.
Authorize?
Okay, city council? Okay. Gibson?
Yes.
Ellis? Hannah?
Yes.
Rivers?
Yes.
Jensen?
Yes.
Supra?
Yep.
McMahon?
You know, one of the big challenges up here on Broad Street.
Yeah.
Not much.
Oh, yeah.
Shell.
Yeah.
Huh? Back when the horse and buggy days.
Oh, yeah.
So that basically brick on the
Thank you,
that
Jason. Thank you.
with asphalt layer on top of that. No wonder everything ground.
That's interesting. I didn't know they did that.
That's how it's built. What Jeff's talking about, and I've actually experienced this too.
Uh-huh.
The Sapp Brothers is a challenge with these truckers, and it's like, me, I'm big enough, I don't care about you. Yeah.
I bought a fridge out of that neighborhood. About that. We were talking about that on the line, where's that connection? I had a fridge in the back of the pickup and I'm trying to. I waited for a while to find the right gap.
Is there a way a guy can find out exactly when they're doing it out here?
Yeah, you should be able to go to Nebraska Public
Well,
Transportation.
that road project had been online. I found it somehow. Shut off. Oh, and that's where it's coming from, this one here.
Yeah, so, sorry, I should have pulled up the map, but you were talking about something over here and then over improving.
And that's what Dave's talking about. He was gonna say there.
Just, I mean, well, and yeah, you could just look at a way to contract a little bit. And
Well, that's the
pedestrian
biggest,
crossing.
it's like I say, it's 55, because even when on Morningside Road, past Luther, I think it's 45 out there. Now with the buildings up there.
If you ever go by Dodge on West Roads.
Yeah.
It's sign 45, everybody drives 65.
And I think what they think it actually is, because they think that's the way.
I've been guilty
Well,
of
the
that.
road out here north here, that's 275 miles an hour. That's what the sign says. See ya.
Yeah, nothing gets in your way between here and there, right?
Take care, sir.
Yep, you too.
I don't remember. Yep.
Well, thanks for taking such good care of it.
Thanks, I didn't have all the answers, so. No, good questions. Good questions.
Anyway, there's something to say.
See you again. Thanks.
Time is now 6:30. We'll open up open public comment. Gives any member of the public an opportunity to speak on any item on the that's not on the agenda for up to 5 minutes. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're in the council chambers, there's a sign-in sheet. Please come and sign in. There's also comment cards.
Today.
Jeffrey, they have one available.
I think there were two. I forgot to bring the sheet. Thank you.
I was looking for that too. The Ridge Road. But I think it's just 6 years. Time is old. Magic. We talked about adding another section. No, this is still okay. Stairs. What? There went upstairs. Always scares people when people are running to get out.
You would think, wouldn't you? I mean, you think, I mean, no. Yeah, that's.
We like to see.
Well, it's quarters now. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I thought.
is to get an update of the Cedar Bluffs Water Project. There's been some rumoring about some of the costs. They've escalated or things that have changed. There hasn't been much of an update on that other than what was recently passed as far as an addition to the initial contract. So an update on that would be good for the public to see what's going on with that and what the date of completion is. And then also I would ask that you as the council engage more as it comes to your agenda on the land use map. That is part of your comprehensive plan. I attended the planning commission meeting last night, and I think what didn't get addressed to the fullest extent that perhaps it could have been is that land use map, which is an integral part of the comprehensive plan, just like your long range transportation plan is, and your use itself, though, is what you base your zoning on. So future zoning depends on the updates in this comprehensive plan on the land use. So you're projecting what you're going to use in the near future and in 10 years down the road future, what that purpose of that land is going to be. Please bear in mind as you consider this at the council level that this impacts not just you, but your neighborhood and your wards. Those people that are now there that help build Fremont and become the community it is. Some of these that are affected are along Morningside. Some of them are in the northeast quadrant. Some of them that actually had a little more pushback last night was from the military area. As military exists now, it is an access to get out of Fremont and access to the state lakes and access to Lake Ventura area to other neighborhoods along the lakes. However, with that 2-lane of Highway 30 coming to an end, with the addition of your 4-lane going straight to the west on the north side of Fremont, rather than coming down and curving down along Butler Ag and coming down where it traditionally had by the old drive-in theater, those of you old enough to remember it there. That will be an access road of sorts coming off Highway 30. You will not have that need for that truck traffic as much because you are expanding your areas around Fremont for the escape routes, ingress and egress into Fremont. So that makes that military avenue more of a residential arena rather than a industrial tract of sorts. And to intend to turn that to an industrial tract where some of those areas are pegged is going to take away the flavor of that whole area. Isaac Walton's will be fully impacted by that for sure. As will St. Pat's Cemetery, which now has a cemetery area abutting our Ridge Cemetery and the property they own to the south. And Mr. Gibson, you're familiar with cemetery business, things do fill up. There is also some other areas of the town that you need to take a look at, but again, you're all representative of our wards. You all have to answer to constituents, but you also know the impacts of the land use map. You don't rezone without it matching your land use map. If it's not on the land use map, you're running contrary to it. That's part of your comprehensive plan by state statute that ties in together. You don't alter and change your zoning to meet your need or the need of a particular person, but you do it to meet the needs of your future Fremont. And then I guess when it comes to your 1 and 6 year road plan, you'll be having that on your agenda as well soon. I did notice that there is an addition, again, after direction of the city council to have it removed from budget of the 23rd Street and Bell Street intersection, which was kind of surprising to keep a $10 million budget line item in there when it was clearly the direction of the city council to have it removed. If you're going to do that in the far future, you can consider it at that time and bring it back. But why expend and earmark those future dollars now? And then also 32nd Street paving. I'm not sure where that popped up at, but it's coming in from Yeager and going due east. Who's paving for that paving? Is that going to be a shared cost because of the county land to the north and city land to the south? Are the owners of the tech park area abutting that area going to actually pay for that and their access to 32nd? Why are we considering paving that in year 1 and 6 year? I would appreciate an answer at the council level on that when you guys do have that on your agenda. And lastly, but not least, Mr. Sukum, Councilman Sukum, excuse me, can answer to this at some point. And I know that it's been part of his need as well. Ridge Road, extending south of 23rd Street. There is talk of that going to the 30th, the old, now soon to be old 30 highway. Because that old 30 highway will still access the new extension due west. And the reason for that was to allow access, not just for citizens there, but for also emergencies and emergent. So the Jones Street access, Road T paving from Ridge Road going over into the neighborhood to the east and tying into 77 perhaps. But that was something that was asked for, not just in 2021, but in 2020, 2019. And now that 4-lane is going to be finished sooner than later. Within the next 2 years, you will see that 4-lane tied in. And that's when you're going to see the need for that. So I would like that to be at least considered at the council level in your discussions for adding that to your 1 and 6 year plan. Thank you.
Wow, you find all the good pens there. under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will open up the city council regular meeting. The time is 7 o'clock. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call. Please vote for roll call.
Eight council members are present, Mayor.
Next is mayor's comments. We have two service awards for February. Rick Shutt, 10 years of service. Rick was hired in 2012 as a firefighter EMT for the Fremont Fire Department. In 2013, Rick received his paramedic certification. And then Derek Schuler, 10 years of service. Derek was hired in 2012 as a firefighter EMT for the Fremont Fire Department. Want to again, thanks to those two fire department members for 10 years of service. That's all for my comments. We go on to item 1 is a motion to adopt the current agenda for the February 22, 2022 regular meeting. Councilman Gibson.
So moved.
Councilman Legband.
I will second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to the consent agenda, all items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussions of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda by either staff, council, or the public? Councilman Yerger.
I'd like to ask a couple questions on item 5, please.
5. Are there any other items? Seeing none, I take a motion to approve consent agenda items 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. Councilman Legband.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda items 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 5, resolution 2022-027 to award bid to TNT Cleaning Services for cleaning of Auditorium, Christensen Field, and Friendship Center. We'll now have staff report from Nick Hansen, our Parks and Rec Director.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. If everybody's had their packet, you can take a look into it. Any questions, we can obviously go over anything that you need to.
Nick, do you want to give a little bit of background on what you're proposing tonight?
Yeah,
Please.
well, okay, certainly. We've been looking into possibly having a cleaning service come out to clean our facilities. We've listened to our staff over the last 3 months, and they've given me some pretty good information on not being able to keep part-time custodian people or find part-time custodian people, or even keeping our event supervisor maintenance person that was out there. So of course, we've crunched some numbers to see maybe there's a better way to go about this. And this would be the way that we decided, as in finding a professional cleaning service to go out and clean Christensen Field. The Friendship Center, which hasn't had anybody clean that besides our staff for the last year and a half. So that was a big bonus, especially with the seniors that are out there every single day. And then the auditorium. Obviously, the auditorium will have the library go over, but not a big issue. We wrote in the contract that it is possible that the library won't be available through September for a year or possibly longer. And this is basically per cleaning. So it's when we need them. It's not every single day. This is a per cleaning that we usually average around 50 to 60 rentals in our east and west rooms in the auditorium, and around 60 rentals in the Christensen field area. And then obviously the senior center would be hit Monday through Friday because it's open all week.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Questions? Councilman Yerger.
Well, I have a few questions, and I did have some discussion with the interim city administrator on this before tonight's meeting, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to address the issue specifically related to the contract and the auditorium. Because the cleaning is, like you say, on a per occurrence basis, and typically wouldn't require as many cleanings as daily, depending on how you have the facility rented out or whatever, I assume. So the usage would drive that, and that would be Parks and Rec expense.
Right.
Now with the library moving over there for a portion of the year, and who knows for how long into the future, this contract may or may not specifically apply. What I was understanding is that the library will be picking up in their budget the associated cleaning costs for the facilities that they're using.
Correct.
Can you confirm that that's the agreement that you have with the library, that what's in here for the auditorium cleaning is for rented use, cleaning purposes, but not for the cleaning related to library usage? Is that accurate?
Yep, correct. We already looked into that a couple months ago, visiting with Laura, as in they would bring their custodian over when they would take full access of our auditorium. That would be the library. This is just Parks and Rec stuff. So that's why we wrote it in that contract, where if their services are not needed due to the library going over, they'll wait until it opens back up.
And this contract doesn't cover the library. They have their own custodian.
They have their own custodian, yes.
So they'll be cleaning whatever rooms, facilities, area in the auditorium that they use, including the restrooms, et cetera, because public will be in using those on a daily basis, and they will be responsible for all of that during their tenure at the library and at their expense, not Parks and Rec.
Correct. It would be the library's responsibility when they take over our building.
I asked those because to the extent that this contract was per occurrence, and if in fact it was going to be incurred by the Parks and Rec department on a daily basis, your cost estimates would have been significantly understated based on the usage that they have, which is every day.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
That's why we don't want them in there they got their own cleaning service.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from council? Thank you very much, Nick.
Thanks.
Any comments from the public?
Barb Bushy, 2037 East First, Fremont, Nebraska. I just need to clarify, would the cleaning be after each event?
It's challenging.
We're not supposed to be answering. You can answer her after.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, that's what I wanted to clarify, and because they're good enough to let us have our blood drive out there every 2 months, and that place is spotless when I leave. We have boyfriends come in, so I wonder if they would have to come in and clean after us. We don't do the bathrooms, but everything else is cleaned. And also, would this cleaning charge be paid out of the deposit that people have to make for the auditorium or for Christensen Field or whatever? Well, it'd be Christensen Field now, but that's my concern. And I guess that's all I really wanted to get clarified, rather than if they were going to be on a monthly thing or per event.
Any other public comment? Okay, Director Hanson, you can address the question if you'd like.
Certainly, good question. We've also looked into that, as in, this is a unique cleaning contract because our hours are different, our rentals are different. We rent from 8 in the morning to midnight is when they have their contracts for our rental facilities. When it comes to the blood drive, yes, we would have somebody go out there and clean the facility after the last day that you're out there. We also have a part-time that would go out and do some of just the toiletries that we already have a contract with right now. So when it comes to every event, yes, every event we would have somebody out, but let's say we have a craft show that has it from Monday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're not going to send out our cleaning crew until Monday. We'll have our just normal custodian or part-time person that we have hired out there to actually go out and clean our restrooms on a Saturday morning and a Sunday morning. Then our actually cleaning contract guys will come out on a Monday to actually hit the full facility, if that answers the question. I hope.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other comments from council? Okay, I would just also like to point out in this, the fiscal impact, and want to thank Nick Hansen for his work. He looked at kind of having to hire these positions to clean and what the cost would be. And it's estimating with this contract, we would save in fiscal year 21-22, $46,183, and then $49,000 for fiscal year 22-23. So I just thank you for taking the time and talking to your staff and coming up with a solution to really benefit financially the department, but I also think keep our facilities clean and ready to go. Are there any other comments, Councilman Gibson?
I'd just like to comment for the blood drive. I've been involved with that for the last 20 years, that they do a great job of cleaning up their own facilities area. So whatever we have to pay for a part-time janitor, whatever is very light, I'm sure you guys do a great job of cleaning up after it's over with for that 2-day blood drive. Thanks.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
If not, I'd move approval of resolution 2022-027.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to unfinished business. Item 8, ordinance 5607 to change zoning from PD plan development to SC suburban commercial and to remove the property from the plan development on property generally located on the southeast corner of Morningside Road and Lauren Lane. This would be for second reading. We'll have staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. Travis J. Cott, City Attorney. The reason I guess I'm giving staff report today is just to give a little update on how this has flip-flopped back to Planning Commission and came back to City Council. So y'all can recall at the last City Council meeting, this item came up and there was an issue with whether it constituted spot zoning and whether it conforms to the comprehensive plan. And those issues I felt could be addressed by keeping the district as a PD and just changing the plan of the PD. Well, after the meeting, I'd spoken to the applicant and the applicant does not want it to remain a PD. He would prefer to change the zone to commercial. So, and as you recall, we did hold first reading of that ordinance with the request to have the Planning Commission consider a PD version of the plan or a change of zone. So Planning Commission did consider that last night, and the Planning Commission did affirm that the approval for the change of zone to commercial. And so tonight, I believe the applicant is here to kind of explain the reasons why the applicant wants it to be zoned commercial. So this will be for second reading tonight. No real changes to the staff report from the last meeting other than just that update and kind of the procedures of how this occurred. So I can take any questions.
Any questions for staff? The applicants here, if they want to come up at this time.
Mayor, excuse me, Mayor, members of the council, I'm
Brad Holtorf. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Falco Company, which is a company owned by Paul Gifford and Marty Gifford, who are present here, and they will be glad to speak and answer questions as well. Just as a way of a background, basically Falco is a company that bought and owns 80 acres of tract down in this particular area. And when they bought that 80 acres, it was zoned as a PD. They took approximately 30 acres of that property and platted it, and this board has approved, where they have basically a residential area as well as multi-residences in that particular plat. This particular piece of property is a part of that they're asking it to be zoned the suburban commercial, because it is their plan to have a office building there on this particular tract. They already have a lessee who is willing to have that building built there for them and lease it. And it is an employer that's going to employ people and benefit the community. And the plan that they're going to do is already in front of you, which is a little bit unusual because the site plan that was provided to Jennifer, I think it was included in your materials. So you'll see that's what's going to be going on this property, is this basically office building. It's important for the people who are leasing that property, because one of the terms of that lease would be that they would have the right to buy that particular property at some point in the future. And it is important to them, as a part of that lease, that this be a suburban commercial property, depending upon what they may or want to do further with that property as they move, they wanted to expand and so forth, because the PD requirements are different than having it as a suburban commercial. So that is the crux of why we really want that done. And Falco is in a position now where they have a lessee for this particular property, but we cannot complete that lease, because unless we can perform by building of this building under the terms that are set out for us, we can't move forward, and we want to do that. The application was filed to change this particular piece. And I think in your packet, you should have the different maps there that I think is a part of it. At least I did, and the information was given to me. There's a zoning map, and then there's also a vicinity map. And if you look at it, this particular piece of property is adjacent to Morningside Road, which is on the north. And so this particular tract faces Morningside Road, and that would be where this office would be constructed. Immediately to the left of that particular property is the multi-family dwelling that has already been platted. And then to the right of this is more just open space as part of the farm ground at this point in time. And then the balance of that land is still farm ground, but it is all PD, which we're not asking to change that at this particular time. The application was made in accordance with the zoning section 11-316.04, which is saying what you do to go about applying that. They did that. One of the things is they have to have it looked at by the planning commission, who doesn't have to make a recommendation, but in this case, they did 2 times. They did it on February 8th, I think was the first time, and then looked at it again after the council said, hey, we want you to check this again, and they did last night. And both times they recommended approval unanimously. So I do think that's an important factor to look at in this case. So when you decide whether or not to grant the application, there's subsection C of that section that I talked about, 11-316.04, has 5 different factors, criteria that you look at in deciding whether this should be granted. It is our position that we have met those criteria. And the first 2 of those criteria really talk about, well, what are you doing with this property and how it interacts with your comprehensive plan? And is it a violation of that or in compliance with it? And I would refer you to the staff reports. There are 2 of them there for you. One that's a part of this application process, and another one on the second thing that comes in front of you. But the staff report says this is in compliance with your comprehensive plan, and that the use that we're making of this property is not something different than what would have been anticipated or authorized anyway. So we believe we complete those first 2 factors. And then if you look at the surrounding property, well, who's going to be benefited or hurt by this? Well, it's Falco itself. Falco owns the property on all sides of this property, except to the north where the road is at. And if you go across the road, Morningside Road, you're now into light industrial. So we just don't see how this office building is going to have any negative effect on the properties around it. And if so, basically Falco owns those. They would be suffering from that. So unless you have any questions, I would like to have either Paul or Marty come forward and enlighten you further on what that project is and answer any specific questions you might have. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ganem.
Well, not so much
Oh, excuse me.
questions yet, but I certainly want to check my level of understanding here. Because we're in planned development, that whole big area, except within that area, there was some land designated for like office building or business use, right? Is that correct? And I know I talked about that earlier. Certainly appreciate Jennifer Dam's time in talking with me. And a business can be built though under the PD designation. Is that correct? As it stands? With a public hearing.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
If you look in your packet, you'll see that I included two maps. One is the planned development map, which is very similar, basically the same thing as the preliminary plat map. The two parcels at the north end along Morningside Road were approved for multifamily use and commercial use. Office space is a limited use within the planned development. There was some question that I don't think we ever actually resolved about whether or not I could approve the office space administratively. There are ways in our ordinance that you can do that in a planned development. It's a little more clear and I think a little more straightforward to have the public hearing. And this provides an opportunities for the council and the public to see what's going on in that space, which is what we're doing.
Okay, so this counts as the public hearing to change.
Correct.
The designation.
There are now two public well, there have been multiple public hearings. First, when Mr. Gifford brought the plan development through and it was designated for commercial use. At the Planning Commission and at the City Council, there were public hearings. There have been now two public hearings at the Planning Commission on this specific item, and now two public hearings at the City Council on this. Or official public hearing was at the last meeting. This has still been left open for public comment. So yes, basically a public hearing, public input at this point in time.
Okay, and you also indicated to me, because it appeared as though it might have been spot zoning, and that is not correct.
I don't interpret it as spot zoning. I don't think our attorney interprets it as spot zoning. It has been approved as commercial zoning within the planned development already. So the same use that has already been approved is being proposed.
So, and I know our lawyer would not allow us to do anything that's not legal. So I understand that this is all legal and okay legally to do. I was just questioning because these are potential Ward 4 constituents.
Understand
that PD allows them to have a hearing, a public hearing when they do it, and they can still build the office building and it can still happen anyway. And changing that would also change what kind of businesses you can have, and that's all right. But what it does eliminate is any public hearing or input on what's going to be happening around that residential area. And I'm going to assume, and maybe of course they can answer this question too, they're still going to plan to build residential around that area.
that's what's been approved in the plan development that had public hearings. Tonight, there's a public hearing for people to be able to have input into this requested change of zone. And they've actually gone beyond and they're showing the site plan of what they are proposing to build at that particular location. So the public has an opportunity, the people who are in that area have an opportunity to comment on that at our last meeting, at this meeting, and at 2 planning commission meetings.
Okay, and I saw that too, that they do have some opportunity there. But changing it then for future opportunity, that goes away for input or public hearing. If they're gonna do something with it, and I just wasn't
correct.
sure
The,
why we would skip the one step of allowing a public hearing if you can still get what you want, unless it's necessary. And I agree, rules aren't
and I'll
set in
let,
stone because
Sure.
different situations and different people.
I'll let the
You have to
applicant
do that.
address why they don't
Please.
want the additional review in the planned development. It doesn't necessarily require a public hearing. The office is a limited use, not a conditional use in the planned development. And so there is still that question of whether or not it could have been done administratively.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff from city council? Yeah,
Hello, Paul Gifford, 2450 Colorado. I'll try to explain a little bit of how we got to this stage. 2 years ago, there was an RFP put out for this building to build and lease back. They sent, it's from an out-of-state person, they sent locations they wanted to be in Fremont. Our location was one, and we bid on it. And there was an Iowa firm that bid on another location, and somebody in Elkhorn bid that they had sites located that they would go on. We were the selected bidder. COVID come in. This was 2 years ago. COVID come in, the big corporation backed down, slowed it down and everything. And then it geared back up about 8 months ago and repriced things, worked through the lease. And I worked with Jennifer probably last October of how do we get this done, and it's been very helpful. I think December 9th, I filed all paid the fees and filed the things. And she said at that time, March 8th would be as soon as it could be done. Well, this is a Fortune 500 company. It's publicly traded. It's going to have, it's about 7,000, little shy of 7,000 square feet. They give us the plans. It's not my plan. They give us the building plans, the elevations, everything we got to do. It looks just like a house, a large house, 7,000 feet. It's 1 story, got a pitched roof, asphalt roof, brick and other good products on the outside. That's what we have to do. We have, and then, so I filed with Jennifer. It's gone through the process. I have a signed lease from them. I can't sign the lease because I don't have a property it can go on. And she told me March 8th would be the soonest we could do it. December 9th, I paid my fees and turned the stuff in. That's a long time for one lot to go. They're hanging with us, but it's getting real touchy whether they're going to go to Elkhorn or not. And they're not in Fremont now. But the general manager lives in Elkhorn. He doesn't get to make the decision, but he has some input into it. So that's the process we've been through. We own the ground around it. We don't want to harm the rest of our ground. And the real reason why this applicant, I just sold a business in Fremont to an out-of-state large company. And they do zoning checks. They do everything. You've got to fill out forms that Jennifer does for us that we're in compliance, or they won't buy that thing. And this outfit says, we're not going to, they have the option to buy in the lease, and they will not purchase that in a PD because they don't, first of all, they don't understand what it is. And they're at the mercy of a council or something to tell them what they're going to do. The PD also restricts what they can do on that lot. They can only add, I think it's 5% of square footage to it without coming back to the planning commission and the city and having all these hearings. Well, there's all kinds of excess ground there, and 5% of 7,000 isn't much addition. They truly, I don't think they can add parking or anything on there without getting permission. There's percentages in the ordinance of what they can do. And they're saying, we don't live here. We're in New York and we're not going to fight that. We're not going to be put in that position. And I buy it with them, I mean, they don't want to fly back here for hearings. So that's really where we got at it. And we visited with the city attorney. He says it's 100% legal. It tells us that it's not spot zoning and it meets the comp plan and everything. And so, we're just here to put a piece of property in Fremont that's going to hire well-paid people and contribute it. I mean, I don't know what else we can do. I'll answer any questions.
Councilman
I
Gannon.
cannot tell you who the company is. I mean,
No, that's all right. I understand the negotiations. You don't reveal who's coming or whatever. So thank you. I just wanted to check my level of understanding with that. I wanted to keep an open mind with that too. And so I appreciate you coming up tonight too and sharing your insights. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Okay, any other comments from the public? I just did that. Okay, seeing no public comment, Councilman Yerger.
So I'd like to start by just stating for the record, and that generally I'm supportive of the applicant's commercial application, but I believe that the current PD zoning district should stand because commercial uses are adequately covered under the UDC and the zoning requirements for PD. Earlier today, I sent these documents to members of council for the review this evening because I planned on going through some of this discussion, and I'd like to have those documents received into the record this evening.
Motion to receive. Councilman Legband. Okay. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make a motion to receive.
Okay. Councilman Gibson. Okay, cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
I'd appreciate it if you'd reset the clock to 5 minutes so that I have my full time to actually ask my questions.
Go ahead.
The material that I sent out was largely material that I discussed in advance of sending this out. I had discussions with both the mayor, the interim city administrator, the planning director, and legal, as I indicated in my email to everyone. There may or may not be some issues with regards to whether or not this should be legally or not treated as a spot zoning, even though it certainly looks like one when you carve out a lot surrounded by either residential properties or PDs on 3 sides. Seems to meet the standard that would typically be used. And I even included a reference that was in the Nebraska Supreme Court discussion that legal counsel didn't refer me to, but spot zoning is generally defined as singling out a small parcel of land for uses classified differently from the surrounding area, primarily for the benefit of the owner of the property to be zoned. That's kind of what we're doing here. And so whether it's legally spot zoning or not, it's concerning, and we ought to be taking that into account. Rezoning in the PD is actually covered by city code already. And so in the document that I sent out earlier today, I highlighted some of the issues, not just the spot zoning issue, which I thought was important backdrop, but the key UDC sections for governing commercial uses of zoning districts. It explains the rationale for why you wouldn't necessarily approve the rezoning from PD to suburban commercial. And some of that's already been discussed this evening by Councilman Ganem. 11-316-04 has been referenced this evening already, and it is a significant item of criteria. But what's important here is that in the criteria for approval that was referenced earlier, the proposed zoning does not match the current land use map. And I have provided you the copies of the land use map in the material that was handed out. Shows the current zoning. It shows the current land use, which is residential and or has been treated as mixed use residential PD. It is not commercial on the land use map today. The land use maps that were being discussed by the consultant, strangely enough, shows a piece of this as being red or commercial in the future. But that's not yet been adopted, so it doesn't apply currently. One of the most significant things that I found in trying to figure out why would we want to do this and why was it important? I think we've heard that tonight to a degree. When you go into the city code and you look at the tables that govern PDs, and that's in the packet I provided you, you can look down the list of uses for commercial that are allowed in PDs. I would point out that office, although it's been referred to as limited, is actually permitted use, as is retail service establishments. Those are permitted uses. Everything else in a PD requires a conditional use permit in a hearing, or it's just not allowed at all. When you change the zoning to suburban commercial, almost everything changes from being conditional to being limited use. That is, you can have it by right. And so essentially, you don't have to have public hearings. And I suspect that that's what's all engaged here. Kind of heard it, I think, in the comments that were made by the applicant with regards to they want to be able to have a free reign lease. They want office space. Office space is allowed in the PD. We don't need to change the zoning to allow office space. We don't need to change it to allow retail services. But you would have to have discussion if the leasee wants to change the land use to something, not land use, the zoning to something, uses, excuse me, to something else. Under the SC zoning, he wouldn't have to ask. Under PD, he has to at least come and say, I want to change from office space to something else that in the PD says it takes a conditional use permit. That's the thing that's being lost here in the translation, is that the public in and surrounding the area within 300 feet needs to have an opportunity to have a hearing when you do rezoning or reusing of material of areas that you've determined were commercial. And those are the citations I gave you in the packet: 31604, 31605, the zoning maps, the land use maps. All of those things were given for purposes of helping you understand why we should not move forward with this. Giving more unfettered authority over to the commercial use of this area is not in the public's best interest. The public is supposed to be safeguarded by what we do. And so making sure that when they change the uses within that commercial area from one that might be allowed today to something that might be questionable, a hearing is not an onerous thing to do. You just come to the city, you say you want to make an application to change the use, it goes to hearing, 99% of those are approved, you're done. You just go about your merry business. So I think it's something that we should not be entertaining tonight. And that's why I gave you the packet of material. I hope you had a chance to read it before you came.
Councilman Legband. You're on, Brad.
Sorry.
Yeah, we went through the first reading, and I want to thank the staff and legal, because there was a discussion that some people thought maybe we shouldn't or should change it. You paused, you looked things over, you're our professionals. And if staff and legal say, yes, we can do this, then to me, I don't see any problem with this. Sure, there are sections you could take something out of here, take something out of there, make it look good or bad. But again, I'm following staff's recommendation. You're our professionals, and so if you're saying this is good, we can do this. I'd hate to lose a Fortune 500 company because we're battling over a word here or a word there. And so again, I'm backing what staff and legal recommends.
Councilman Ellis.
I have a couple of questions for Jennifer. First of all, why did this take so long? You said he had it to you on December 9th.
Right.
Is this a typical amount of time required for us to, the city to do this?
Our deadline for a planning commission meeting is about 4 weeks ahead of the planning commission meeting.
Okay.
That gives us time as staff to review, and then also we have the notification requirements.
Okay. So this is kind of a normal. We're not
Right.
trying to push the envelope here. This is
Right,
Very
it's,
normal process.
it's a normal process. So he missed the deadline for the December Planning Commission meeting. So he was on the January Planning Commission meeting, which then carries you over
Okay.
to where we are today.
The other question is probably for the applicant, but I know they can't get up and talk anymore. You know, from the drawing, it looks like it could be spot, but we have no idea what's going to happen to the east of that property.
We don't know the specific commercial use. It is designated for commercial use. I'm going to step back away from this property for just a second.
Sure.
If you look at Gallery 23, Gallery 23 is a planned development. It has multifamily up against 275, which has not yet been developed. You have commercial uses that have been designated where RTG is being constructed. Then you have residential uses, the townhouses and single family to the south of there. If you look at our current land use map, what was approved when Gallery 23 was approved, it has commercial zoning all across the 23rd Street side or Highway 30 side, and then down along Highway 275. So if you're making that same argument, then it wouldn't be in conformance with the comprehensive plan, but it was viewed as a package through the plan development process, which is what this has been reviewed as a package. When you reviewed the plan development, it was considered to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is more than just the land use map. We'll be talking about this as we go through the update process. You know, we've got a land use map, but there's also contained within the document goals and policies and other recommendations. So you look at more than just the map when you make a determination.
So the section I guess I'm questioning is you've got the commercial that that portion that he wants to move to commercial. And then right next to it is still his PD. But
Correct.
Then you go just a little bit further east and that is that land is marked commercial for future use. Is that correct?
Right. So within the planned development, there you have the map in front of you. At the north end, there's an area that's for multifamily and then an area for commercial. He's looking at the piece, about half of that piece of commercial that he's asking to remove from the planned development.
Another one, but it's skipping me, so I'll let go. Thank you very much.
Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, Councilman Yorger made some compelling arguments, I thought. We're basically handing them a blank check. You can do whatever you want with this property, just about from the way I'm understanding, with some restrictions, but this is not normal. Is that not correct? This is not the way it's normally done?
Anybody can request a change of zone to a piece of property. And if that change of zone is granted, then you have to follow the regulations of the UDC. So what he's requesting is an area that's already been designated for commercial use to still designate it for commercial use and follow under the requirements of the SC zoning district and the other parts of the UDC. He's provided a site plan. As he stated, if you have the SC zoning, you can expand the building without having to go through another process that can take up to 3 months, which is why his tenant doesn't want to go through that process. He still has to provide a type C buffer yard on Morningside and I think it's a type B on the other 2 sides and meet all of those requirements that would be required under the base PD.
Thank you.
Councilman Vaughn.
Just a general comment, not directed towards anybody in particular, but just 5 years ago, taking a drive down Morningside Road, things are markedly different than they are today. Things have changed a lot. We've seen a lot of businesses pop up. And as I envision 5 more years down the future, driving down Morningside Road, I suspect we would see more of the same. And I really don't have a problem with this. I think it fits the narrative And it's a heck of an opportunity with the Fortune 500 company.
Any other comments from council? Okay. You had your 5 minutes.
Well,
Councilman.
I'm not sure, Mayor, whether or not we were given our initial 5
Yeah.
minutes before staff and we're getting a secondary 5 minutes after staff and applicant have had the chance to discuss, because that's the protocol that we have. If I use my first 5 minutes, at some point, I'd like my rebuttal comments to be allowed, because that's the way it works. So if you skipped us
I
in the
didn't
first
skip.
place.
We had opportunity to ask questions. That was the opportunity for council participation. That's how I felt running. That's where we were in the meeting. There wasn't any more questions. There wasn't any public comment. We moved on to the next part of the meeting. So
I object to that procedure when it asked the council members to indulge some final comments with regards to the differences between PD and SC, because I think they're relatively
go
important.
ahead.
I just would like to draw council's attention to the fourth, fifth, and sixth pages from the end of the packet, where it lays out the differences between the special district PD and the commercial district SC. And my hope is that in facilitating this for the applicant, the lease agreement that you would have with the tenant that would seem to be of concern with regards to zoning changes and conditional use permits can be mitigated by the lease you write that says this lease is for office use only, period. Then it doesn't matter whether we make any zoning changes or not, because they won't be the ones that can come back and do as an alternative to office space, which, by the way, is a permitted use in PD, not a limited use. It's a permitted use in PD, according to this chart. But when we go over to giving suburban commercial, if the leasee has that opportunity to adjust the uses of those buildings, then we are authorizing everything else in that list of SCs to be something that they can do without having a hearing. That's the problem that I'm having. Not that they'll be in the building you want to lease as an office space. I think that's great. Just put that in the lease and end their consternation over having to have hearings on public use. But if they think that they can do under that lease anything that would otherwise be limited use because we rezone this for them so that they can do that at will, no, I oppose that. I think that we have to protect our citizenry with regards to SC. And I'm pretty confident that when I live on Fifth Street in Depperman subdivision, that the vacant lot next to me would never be rezoned commercial. And I'm pretty sure that if Bluestem came to this council and said, you made me change my applications, so I took out a bunch of commercial, but now we've just authorized a suburban commercial area, one parcel in this subdivision at Morningside. I want the same thing in my PD and Bluestem. Are we setting a precedent here that we don't like? I think we could be. And so since we can do all of this in the PD and you can cover your tenant's concerns in the lease, I see absolutely no reason for us to rezone this in order to give unfettered authority to the leasee about what kind of commercial operations he can put in that building if we were to rezone this. And that's my concern.
Mayor, I would just note too that if the council makes a decision to deny the zoning change, we have to have written findings of fact regarding the criteria that are utilized to approve it. So
What does that mean, Travis?
So if you look at 11-316.04, section F2, says the city council shall support its decision to deny the zoning change with written findings of fact regarding the approval criteria. And the criteria are those 5 criteria in subsection C that Councilman Yerger pointed out.
Thank you. Councilman Lakeman.
Yeah.
Well, I am because I thought I was in queue to make a motion.
No, you had rebuttal, so I'm gonna have rebuttal. So, okay. I just, again, of making sure through legal and our professionals, you're okay with the changes we're making. We're not setting any big precedents. We're not doing anything out of the norm. Again, if Jennifer's okay with this and legal's good with this, it should be good enough for us lay people that have only been doing this a few years as opposed to professionals that have been doing this for their whole life. If they're okay with it, then I'm okay with it.
Okay, Councilman Yerger.
If there aren't any further secondary comments by other council members, I'll certainly yield. Are there any?
Councilman Vaughn.
I also want to add that just looking at the size of the parcel in question, there would certainly be some limitations on what they could potentially do in the future that I really think would, assuage most of my fears of potential, for future development of that area.
Go ahead.
Having heard the discussion of council and the questions that were raised by Councilman Ganem, issues that were discussed by Councilman Jensen, and the discussions offered by other council members, I would still resurrect and make a motion to disapprove this because it can be done within the PD zone and the lease agreement, and that's where it belongs. Motion to disapprove.
Okay. Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second. Councilman Legman.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 5607.
This is second reading. Is there a second? Councilman Jensen,
I'll make the second.
cast your votes.
Any opportunity to make a motion to amend the resolution before final
No,
vote?
it's been motioned and seconded, Councilman Yerger.
When do we take amendments to the motion on the floor? Per Robert's rules? Before or after? Council.
There's been a
Yes,
motion and a
yes,
second.
and
Councilman
amendments
Yerger.
can be made and they are ruled on, and then you go back to the main motion if in fact it's amended. Isn't that correct, council?
One problem you have is there's been a motion second, and I guess there's been some votes casted. Generally, there's not even debate until there's been a motion and a second made, but obviously that's not what this body has. That's not this body's practice.
But that's what we just did. And then I offered an opportunity for amended language to be considered before we went to final vote. And you're saying that's out of order.
I would defer to the chair in these types of instances. If you want to make an amendment, it would be an amendment to the motion, and that would be voted on first, and then the main motion would be voted on. But usually that is made, usually the amendment was made prior to a second being made.
Councilman Yerger, you had a motion on the floor to disapprove. Okay, it did not get a second.
I understand.
So there was a motion to approve and a second. We need to vote on that. This is second reading. That's my ruling.
And so you don't have a chance to vote on any amendments that might be made to it because
We
you're not-
haven't-
because you're not going to accept any.
Councilman Yerger, as practice, we haven't generally done that in this body. Would you not agree with that? I mean, when have we motioned and seconded, and then this would be a first time practice for that. And I'm, as
No,
the
I'm-
chair, I'm trying to maintain, I'm trying to maintain order and preside over the meeting in a proper manner that we have conducted in the past. I'm not saying your amendment isn't valid. I'm just saying this would be something new for this body to do. And
Well, it's certainly not an issue that I haven't raised before, but I'll yield to the chair and appeal the ruling for the record.
So that now the council's got to vote on the appeal.
So we're voting on the appeal.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you want me to end this vote without the result being provided?
Yeah.
so vote to appeal my ruling in regards to not taking an amendment at this point.
After second reading.
After second read.
After a.
After second,
So now we just go with this.
So a no vote would uphold your ruling, is that correct?
Yes.
A no vote would uphold the ruling, yes. Councilman Ellis?
I'd have to agree with you at some point that the other meetings that I have been to, you always start the conversation with a motion and a second, and then you go into discussion. So we as Fremont City Council tend to do it backwards. And it's something that I would think that we would probably all sit here shaking our heads thinking that maybe we need to rethink this and maybe try to go back towards more of a Robert's rule. And as soon as the motion comes up, you motion second, then you discuss, then you take the final vote. So it was weird for me to come on council and experience that. I didn't question it, but after being in other venues and other, it's like, yeah, we're kind of doing it different. And
I think that would require a change to our municipal code.
We'd have to change our municipal code.
Yeah.
Well, it can be changed. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
So we're just voting right now on there's no, so a no vote is, upholding the chair. A yes is not. Cast your votes.
The motion fails 1-7.
Okay, we're back to the motion and the second. Cast your votes to hold second reading of ordinance 5607.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
Okay, we'll now have second reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, amending ordinance number 5427 as it pertains to zoning map to rezone the property generally located in the southeast corner of Morningside Road and Lauren Lane from PD plan development to SC suburban commercial, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on second reading.
Moving on to item 9 is an ordinance 5606 to annex property generally located on the southeast corner of Morningside Road and Lauren Lane. This would be second reading. Go ahead, Jennifer.
This is second reading for the request to annex this property. It is associated with the previous request to change the zone and a final plat that will come back to this body for action at the next meeting on March 8th.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger?
Guess I better ask earlier. I won't get to ask. And we've had this debate with legal counsel. I refer you to section 11406 of Fremont Municipal Code that reads, any land that is annexed into the city shall be zoned in accordance with the adopted version of the future land use plan. Do you believe the future land use plan that we currently have in front of us today, that this area is PD or suburban commercial?
The future land use plan is more than just a map. This area has been designated as planned development for commercial use. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and it is consistent with suburban commercial zoning. So yes, I would say it is in conformance.
I agree with you to the extent that a PD allows for commercial. And if you were doing PD annexation with commercial attributes, no problem. We just passed second reading on changing the zoning from PD to suburban commercial. Suburban commercial is not on the land use map. And you're telling me that doesn't matter, and that's not how you read this code?
Councilman Yeager, as we discussed, it's going to be annexed as a PD and the zoning change will occur as approved by council. That can happen simultaneously.
If we change the zoning first, it will.
You're not changing it. They'll be changed simultaneously. It doesn't matter what order on the agenda they're in. They'll be approved as an ordinance 15 days after they're passed.
Couldn't disagree more with you, council, based on the reading of 11406, which you ignored in your response to me with regards to the zoning attributes of this.
Without getting into my privileged communications with you, what I would refer you to is 11-405.07 E or C3. When you approve a PD district, it supersedes all existing and prior zoning classifications. So this PD district, it'll be zoned into the PD district, and then the councils may approve the zoning change for third reading.
No further discussion.
Okay, any other questions for staff? That's where we're at right now. Okay, any comments from the public? Okay, seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Vaughn?
Just wanted to point out the increase in our tax revenue from the township that is currently sitting into being annexed into the city. That's a good thing for us.
Any other comments from council? Take a motion to approve ordinance 5606 and hold second reading. Councilman Legband,
Yeah, I make a motion to approve ordinance 5606 to hold second reading.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have second reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, annexing by voluntary petition property generally located at the southeast corner of Morningside Road and Lauren Lane, Dodge County, Nebraska, and extending the corporate limits to include said real estate, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on second reading.
Moving on to new business, item 10, resolution 2022-029 to renew and authorize the mayor to sign the billing and reimbursement services agreement for ambulance and fire billing, and to sign the business associate agreement. Now I have staff report from Chief Burnt.
Hello, Chief Todd Burnt. What you see in front of you is to renew our current contract with Quick Made Claims to do our fire and EMS billing. In this packet, there's actually two agreements. The first one's the billing and reimbursement service agreement. That is for the services they're going to provide and the fees that they're going to be charging us, like $4,500 a month for EMS billing. And for fire billing, they'll be billing us 10% of what amount is collected. The other agreement that's in this package is the business associate agreement. This is an agreement on how protected health information is protected when it's created, received, because they're going to be using a lot of our patient care reports when they actually do a lot of the billing. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief Burnt? Seeing none, thank you. Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Sukram,
If there's no more discussion from council, I'll make a motion for resolution 2022-029.
okay, thank you. Councilman Jensen, you want to shut off Councilman Sukram, please? Go ahead, Councilman Jensen. Okay. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 11 is a resolution 2022-030 authorizing the mayor to sign Nebraska Department of Transportation resolution awarding the contract for the Rawhide Trail Fremont project to K2 Real Estate Development LLC, approving final plans and specifications and authorizing the mayor to sign contract using the NDOT standard signing process. I have staff report.
Good evening, Dave Godekin, Director of Public Works. As the mayor stated, this is for the Rawhide Creek Trail project. This is a project that's been in the design phase and environmental phase, and lastly, the right-of-way phase for quite a few years. This is to award the bid or agree with the state's award of bid, since we are one of the co-payers of the project.
to K2 construction. The Rawhide Creek Trail is a 2-segment trail. The westerly part is a trail that will start at Ronan Park, roughly 19th Street, and go south down Summers to Linden, and then west on Linden across the railroad tracks over and connect to the airport trail at Airport Road and Linden Street. And the easterly portion of this trail will begin in Clemens Park at Garden City and 19th Street, and will go through Clemens Park on the south side of 19th Street. It will cross Luther Road, then go north on the east side of Luther Road, cross the Rawhide Creek, and then turn east and parallel the Rawhide Creek until you get to that business that's down there on Elkhorn Drive. And then the trail goes north around the business down Elkhorn Drive to Deers Parkway, and then down Deers Parkway and connects to the Johnson Road Trail at the Rawhide Creek and Deers Parkway. The staff report you have tonight, there was a very short timetable on this. This project was bid on the 10th. We received the documents on the 11th. They needed approved by the 2nd of March. And that meant I had till last Wednesday basically to get the council packet together. And in the process of doing that, I was going back and forth with the state on the numbers that you see at the bottom. Those numbers do change slightly. The PE cost would be $367,000 versus $365,000. Right-of-way costs would be $557,000 versus $555,000. Construction cost remains the $1.222 million. Construction engineering would be $183,000 versus $140,000, and then the audit remains the same. So rough total cost of this project will be $2,331,500. Our share of that is 20%, which is roughly $467,000. I guess any questions you may have.
Any questions for our Public Works Director? Councilman Legman?
Yes, so is this already budgeted for?
Yes, it is. It's in our CIP.
Thank you.
Councilman Yerger?
So I'm curious, a couple things. Oh, all the plans that were referenced here in your background material, that wasn't provided to council this evening, and there was a reason for not providing that.
Because the plans are about 100 pages long. The plans and the specs are probably over 100 pages long as well.
Okay, so volume was the issue.
Right, they're on file in my office.
Okay. With regards to, I think you said the description was this is going to go south to 13th Street and then west?
South. Which segment?
Well, I thought you described a segment from 19th Street south on Summers and then west on Linden?
On Linden over to Airport Road where the trail is on
Okay.
Airport Road.
So my question with regards to Linden is, it has been brought up by members of council member representatives. I think Mr. Jensen is probably you. Most of it, railroad crossing, noise reduction or whatever, and the possibility that we might have to close 13th Street if in fact we were to do quiet zones. The railroad maybe not keep us open on all these streets. Is it possible that 13th Street would not be a controlled railroad crossing at some point?
13th Street.
Linden, excuse me.
Okay, yeah, Linden.
Linden.
No, I don't think they would ever close it. It would be more of a restriction as far as they put like a median down the center of the street. So similar to what's over on, I believe that's M Street. There's a median out there and then there's little bollards.
So we wouldn't lose the intersection. That was my
No, you would
concern.
not.
And we want to put a trail across there if we don't have a railroad crossing that's capable of controlling pedestrians.
No, typically there are control devices put in to keep people from driving around the cross arms, that type of thing.
Okay. I think my last question is this one, and I raised this question to interim city administrator before, not directly to you. But the now be it therefore statement number 1 says the city has to provide the funds and pay for all costs incurred until the event of such funds are covered by the feds. So does that mean that we are in effect on the hook, at least temporarily, for the 2 million that you indicated until we get
No.
reimbursed?
No, on this particular project, this project was taken over by the state of Nebraska. The state changed the way they administer federal aid projects about 4 or 5 years ago, roughly. It used to be that we would upfront, like we did on the viaduct project, we would upfront the cost. On this particular project, the state took it over. They managed the project through the engineer, through the environmental, through the right-of-way process. And they bill us periodically for our share. So they bill us at a rate of 20% for the costs incurred. So that would continue through the rest of this project.
So help me clarify or understand that statement. How long does the city, if we build and incur the cost, 2 million, not just the $1.1 million, $1.2 million, or whatever that you described here, we would be paying for all of those funds. We get paid ratably along the way for these, or we have to hold the bill until such time?
No,
as we're
no,
paid?
the contractor bills the state.
They bill the state
The
directly.
bill goes directly to the state, and then they bill us our 20% share. Now,
Okay.
one thing they may do on this project is send us a bill for a certain amount of money up front, so that the state's holding a certain amount of money from the city. They have not done that, but they have on past projects.
So for my purposes, would it be clearer and would it be accurate to say the city hereby agrees to provide the necessary funds to pay for all city costs incurred until the end of such funds? Because we're not going to be obligated to pay the federal portions. Is that
Well,
correct?
it depends on which resolution you're speaking of. There's two resolutions. One-
22030 in the now be it therefore statement, paragraph 1.
I think Tyler named them both the same number, because
Oh,
we
I'm
were
sorry.
provided one by the state. It's in a different font.
Oh, no, I'm
for-
talking about the one that's in our normal font for the city that's signed by the mayor. In the now be it therefore statement, number 1.
I mean, that would be fine to change that in ours. You just can't change the state's
Oh, I understand.
resolution.
I just want
Yes.
to I'm trying to make it clear that what we're obligated for as a city to pay, when your summary statement says we're costing out for $1.2 million, but we have $2.3 or $4 million worth of costs here. I want to make sure that we don't have an obligation to fund those, even temporarily, that the feds are paying for those, not the city. So I'm trying to narrow the scope of what are we on the hook for?
Yeah, and if, when you read the one that the state provided too, there's a clause in there that says something like, if the state decides not to do the project, et cetera, then the city is obligated for a certain amount of the cost as well. And I called them and asked about that, and they said, no, that's just a blanket statement that they put in there. They have no intentions of not doing the project. It's one that they put in.
Okay, so you don't object to my requesting to modify the resolution and insert the word city in that paragraph 1 ahead of the word cost?
If legal counsel is fine with that, I am fine with it as well.
Yeah, I'm fine with that and agreed with it. But one question I have, are we approving both these resolutions?
Yes, well, we're approving our resolution and authorizing the mayor to sign their resolution.
So we have to put in the council member who moved for adoption and all that.
Yes,
that
yes.
information too.
There's a lot more information that they ask on their resolutions.
Okay,
It used to be we could redraft those, but the state doesn't allow you to do that anymore. I'm sure it's a legal issue from their standpoint.
yeah, certainly.
So council, how do we handle 2 resolutions with 2 different resolution numbers when it's not recognized in our packet material or notice? We have to add another resolution number to the state piece?
I think for our purposes, we're approving our resolution and the one that's going to the state will be their resolution. So the
So-
one that will be on file and reference for the city will be 2020-030.
Just about every state project has a separate resolution that they send us.
Yeah,
So does that now be it therefore statement need to reference at least, excuse me for running over my time, but does the now be it therefore resolution statement at least need to acknowledge that we're authorizing the mayor to sign the state's resolution?
I'd prefer you include your city reference in our resolution and not reference the other one.
And not reference the other one at all?
Correct.
But the mayor's going to sign it without council having authorized him doing it
You're authorizing it by this motion.
by this motion?
Yep.
Okay, I would move to amend the resolution then at some point here when it's timely to insert that word city in paragraph 1 of the now be it therefore statement.
Okay. Any other questions for Dave? Okay, thank you. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, is there any additional comments from council? Seeing none, is there a second to the amendment to add the word city into the resolution? Councilman Legman?
I'll second that.
Okay. Cast your votes to amend.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Take a motion to resolution 2022-030 as amended. Councilman Gibson.
I would make that motion to approve resolution 2022-030.
As amended. Councilman Sukram?
Was that as amended?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 12, resolution 2022-031, authorizing the utility general manager to sign bid for firm capacity from Northern Natural Gas. I have staff report.
Troy Shaven, interim utility general manager. We were contacted by Northern last fall and they were getting prepared to offer another open season for firm natural gas capacity. This is one of those things that we buy so much gas from them, but as you saw, like last year during the polar vortex, a lot of communities bumped up against their capacity, and they in turn got a lot of fines, a lot of penalties, a lot of high priced gas for exceeding their capacity. Fremont did not, in part because we had the capacity there, and in part because there are some other things we're able to do with propane injection and interruptible customers and stuff like that. But this is for winter only gas capacity. We have adequate capacity in the spring and summer months. It's adding approximately 1,000 decatherms per day. I believe on here the price they say is $1.25 million. That number is almost identical. It's $7 higher than how much we paid for the same 1,000 decatherms about 2 years ago. We've gone up every time we get a request for open season, we respond and say we're interested. It's not a binding contract. It just says we're interested. Here's how much we would look at. And then they usually come back in 2 or 3 months and tell us what the cost would be. Those costs have come back for that same 1,000 decatherms a day. It's come back as low as 800,000. It's come back as high as 2.8. We have typically bought in at that 1.2 million for 1,000 decatherms. The last 2 times we were in that range. We've declined at 1.8 and 2.4. So this cost is at least in line with the same costs that were there about 2 years ago for that same amount of capacity. Just for reference, in our winter months, on a day like today, we will typically use 16, 17, 18,000 decatherms of natural gas. Our max capacity right now is 21,000. Typically, there are 4 or 5 days a year where we will exceed that 20,000 and start bumping up on that 21. So that's why we're asking for another 1,000. With the growth that's been through Fremont, we really haven't seen the natural gas growth in the homes or the apartments as they've kind of lagged behind. And we're estimating that in the next 2 to 3 years, we could probably see another 1,000 to 1,500 decatherm usage from just the residential. We don't know when Northern's going to have an open season. They typically do it about every 2 or 3 years, it seems like. If they didn't do it for another 3 years, we do have the ability to ask them to open it. But the advantages with doing it the way it is now is they open it up to everybody. And there's kind of a cost savings amongst 10 bidders as opposed to one bidder having to have them modify their system to accommodate our need only. So there certainly is a cost savings doing it on their open season rather than having us declare it. Also, as part of this, we sat down with Northern when this first came out. Our Northern rep, Stacy Rossman, came to Fremont and told us we were actually approaching, this is October, told us we were actually approaching our capacity through our TBS, our town border station 01, which is on Ridge Road. Kind of on that, where that you turn right to take the right onto the, where you go to the State Lakes right after you get over the tracks. It's like parallel with that road. That town border station is approaching its capacity. By doing the town border station upgrades now, we are able to save a little bit of money. One of the estimates we had was about $650,000 to do that estimate if that was on its own. As doing it as part of this job, they'll be here, they'll be in the area, they'll have crews. We're able to save about 10% on the cost of that town border station. So we're asking to approve the capacity agreement and approve the agreement to upgrade the town border station.
Any questions? Councilman Yerger?
I don't really have any questions. I want to compliment the DU department and staff for looking out religiously for the citizens of Fremont and trying to keep our costs contained and to make sure we don't end up having exorbitant costs to pay. So I want to thank you and your folks for doing that. My only question is not mentioned in your staff reports, really a question for legal, but you can answer as well. I assume that this agreement, as I'm going to ask, since it's not stated, all these contracts and agreements are being reviewed by legal. Is that correct?
The last two we've done have been reviewed. He hasn't reviewed this one because we haven't gotten it yet. But it's standard language.
Standard language that
Standard language
has
with
been
these
reviewed
numbers
in the
in there.
past?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Take your motion in regards to this item. Councilman Sukram.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-031.
Councilman Yerger.
Second motion.
Cast your votes.
Councilmember Yerger, it didn't record your vote. Thank you very much. Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 13 is a resolution 2022-032 to authorize staff to prepare an emergency action plan in cooperation with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I have my interim city administrator hat on at this point, just for those of you keeping track. We were approached by basically the Silver Jackets. They're a group within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers after the 2019 flood to develop an emergency action plan. And we've had actually 2 meetings so far. One was just kind of a kickoff, and then this last one was to assign the areas that each one of us are going to be responsible for developing. And it's already had us look at, kind of lessons learned from the last flood, things we might choose to do differently. The exciting thing about this is there is no fiscal impact other than staff's time because it's grant funded. The Silver Jacket, we have a member of the Silver Jackets that comes to our meetings, as well as someone from the Army Corps of Engineers. Tom Smith has been very generous with his time from the county and been here. And we also have someone from NEMA participate. And excuse me, there's a FEMA person that has been on a Zoom call as well. And they're interested in helping us make sure that we have that plan moving forward in case there happens to be additional flooding. I'll take any questions.
Councilman Vaughn.
You mentioned Tom Smith. I assume you're referring to the Dodge County Emergency Manager.
That would be the one. Yes, sir.
I would second some of Jody's comments in regards to, I've been a part of these meetings and it really brings the whole city together. And when you go through an emergency action plan, it's amazing. You know, yes, 2019 was an extremely difficult time, but it's amazing the lessons that we have learned. And this plan, which will be that much better because of what we went through, and just sitting in and hearing all the expertise and the events that happened and how we can have that into an actual plan moving forward, I think will be extremely beneficial. And it is a pretty long process, over a year long, and 15 meetings. And there's a tabletop exercise that we get everybody in a room. And we, you know, if a disaster happened, these are the steps that we take. And I think in the end will be a really beneficial thing for the city of Fremont to have. So. Any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street. You had mentioned there had been prior meetings too. Is that correct? I understand. The letter that's in here, it was a little puzzling. It said that your partner is a proposal partner. Name a supporting partners organization. It said proposal partner. And Silver Jackets is involved. And we have a flood mitigation organization of sorts that we have co-partnered with, Dodge County and other entities, taxable districts within our area that head to the north, including drainage districts. I didn't know if Mr. Jensen, I believe, is on that committee, as well as Councilman Sucrum, if they had been invited to attend some of these meetings because of their knowledge going forward on serving on the Water Management Board. Also, I noticed this affirmation, or Fremont Emergency Action Plan, the initial onset of this was 2021, a year ago. And I don't recall this being a meeting that had been brought to the council to approve moving forward. So I just questioned on the signature on this as our former city administrator, but more so the date that it was signed, because it should have been at that time brought to the council to be made aware of. But each community must and should have an emergency action plan. But you should at least have a little bit more involvement, perhaps. Consider at least those that are serving on the Joint Water Management Board. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, any additional comments from council? Councilman Jensen?
So if there's no additional comments, I'll make to approve resolution 2022-032.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Sucrum?
I'll second.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Item 14, motion to approve request for one-time exception to resolution 2021-004 for meal reimbursement. Go ahead, Jennifer.
This is my request. In January, I attended floodplain management training at the Emergency Management Institute in Emmitsburg, Maryland. That's sponsored by FEMA. FEMA reimbursed me for all of my airfare. They provided transportation to and from the airport in Washington, DC. They provided all of the lodging and the training free of charge. The only responsibility of the community is the requirement to buy a meal ticket that costs $234.28, I believe. That averages about $18 a meal. About a year ago, the city instituted a policy not to exceed $15 a meal. Prior to that, the city followed the GSA rate. The GSA rate for Emmitsburg, Maryland is $64 a day, which is also the same rate as Omaha. If we were still following that, the allocation could have been as much as $256. So I would ask for this exception. And I guess I'd also ask that maybe you reconsider when staff is traveling for training, maybe have a discussion about following the GSA rate as you had in the past. It's really difficult to find, even in Kearney, Nebraska, a dinner for $15. And a lot of our trainings where we go, the lunches are provided and breakfasts are provided at the hotel. So that's my comment, and I would appreciate your approval.
Okay, Councilman Vaughn.
I just wanted to attest to the fact I've traveled the country and $15 for a meal is pretty ridiculous in my estimation, especially when you're talking about the East Coast where you were at. I forget the acronym you use, but in the future, Jody, I would like to see something that we would go back to the GSA rate because, yeah, I'm not sure why we passed such a low limit, but even since that time, the rate of inflation has made $15 irrelevant, in my opinion.
Thank you.
But I would make a motion to approve.
Any comments from the public?
Barb Bushy, 2037 East First. I agree. For this instance, yes, we should pass that and give her money. I think what we were referring to about a year ago was when you're having in-city meetings, that's what the $15, I think it was, that came up for that. That was the difference. But when you're traveling, and I know from traveling for the Army, meals get real expensive. And that was, I just wanted to clarify that $15 thing.
Any other comments? Okay. Councilman Yerger.
I'll second Councilman Vaughn's motion, but for a point for the record, before I do, my understanding from reading your materials was the meal plan was not optional. That is, you couldn't attend these meetings if you didn't buy the meal plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
in
this case, the costs are mandatory. In other visits or whatever you might go, it might be flexible. But in this particular case, you didn't have a choice. You either stayed home or you paid the meal plan.
That's correct.
Thank you.
That was a second.
So I did second.
Okay. Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Councilman Gibson,
So moved.
motion to adjourn. So moved. Okay.
I knew you were going to say that.
Okay. Councilman Sukram,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We are adjourned. Have a good night.